Hey everybody, give you an update for the week. We're going to start, I'm just going to give you the rundown quick. The Barr hearing and the Mueller report. Of course, you got Venezuela going on. Medicare for All, H.R. 9, the Climate Action Now Act, the transportation deal that was discussed in Washington earlier this week. And if you don't know it, this has been Holocaust Remembrance Week and Lupus Action Day. So let's start with the Barr hearings. The Attorney General testified in front of the Senate for 5 hours, and I know that the House Judiciary Committee is very angry with the Attorney General because he's declined to come and speak with them. A couple things you need to know. The Mueller report has been given to Congress with many fewer redactions than ever expected. Almost no redactions, quite honestly, compared to what we expected it to be. What's fascinating, too, is that even so, the House Judiciary Chairman has said he will not read it, which I find, I just find that unfortunate and quite honestly irresponsible. That having been said, when you come to testify in front of Congress, especially as the Attorney General, understanding that this investigation has been going on for over 2 years, $25+ million. You know all the statistics on it. You're testifying in front of Congress, not the lawyers that Congress hires to question you. The Attorney General, Congress has oversight. The Attorney General has agreed to come and testify before Congress and be questioned. Understand this too, on the Judiciary Committee, the vast majority, save literally 1 or 2 on each side, are attorneys. They are attorneys that serve on that committee. So I just think it's, look, from my perspective, I think they want to have impeachment hearings in the Judiciary Committee without calling them impeachment hearings. Also, you need to know this as well. While the special counsel Mueller said that he had issues with the characterization of the Attorney General's summary of the report that was put out a few weeks ago. The Attorney General offered to show him the memo before he put it out, and he did not. He declined to look at the memo, but yet now he's criticizing it. So some of the stuff just doesn't seem on the up and up here. The instruments of power, whether it's the Department of Justice, whether it's the FBI, should never be weaponized for political gain by either side, and that's what we're trying. And I do believe that's what the Attorney General is trying to get behind us, because I think it was. So the bottom line is, once again, the Attorney General has found, looking at the Mueller report, that there was no collusion and that there's no case for obstruction. All right, let's move on to Venezuela. As you know, there was a duly elected interim president. That's Juan Guaido. Maduro, the dictator, has refused to recognize the election and remains in power as the authoritarian socialist. And just so you know my position on this, I think we're a long way away from needing to send any troops or to be involved militarily. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, Hezbollah, all of those are involved in this thing in our Western Hemisphere, and we can't allow Russia, especially, or China, to set up shop in Venezuela. And but I think we've got a long way to go diplomatically. But I will say this too: America needs to be on the side of the democratic process and the free and fair and open election of the interim president. So that's what we should. That's where I think we should be on that. Okay, so and just to let you know too, as long as we're having the conversation about socialism and so on and so forth, this is occurring right here in the world today. Just south of America's borders, they've got over 1,000,000% inflation in Venezuela right now. 20 years ago, one of the most prosperous countries in our hemisphere and in South America, to be sure. Now a socialist country where 40 to 50,000 people cross the border every single day for food, water, sanitation, and safety. This is the difference between competitive markets and a capitalist program and socialism. And so while Bernie Sanders and other folks are out talking about how great socialism is, it's not so great in reality. All right, let's talk about legislation. We voted this week on what's called Medicare for All. I call it Medicare for None. It's going to bankrupt Medicare. It gets rid of all private insurance. So if you have private insurance, That's all gone. If you've been paying into Medicare, as many people have, and seniors are depending upon it to be there to care for their health care needs, it will wipe all that out as unaffordable. So while it sounds good, once again, in practicality, when you have to pay for it and administer it, it just bankrupts it for everybody else that is currently depending on it. So I voted no on that. We also had the Climate Action Now Act, which essentially would force the United States back into the Paris Climate Accord. Understand, it wasn't a treaty, even though in my mind it should have been. It was never ratified by the Senate. It was signed by President Obama and and encumbered the United States to comply with this. So while the United States have reduced their carbon emissions by, I think, like 16% over the last 10 years, China has increased theirs by about 290% over the same period of time. And oh, by the way, no European country that has been a signatory to the Paris Climate Accord, have met any of their requirements in that regard. And if we're talking about America specifically, while America would do our job and comply with it, China doesn't have to, and India don't have to comply for literally decades or a decade or decades. So while we're cutting our emissions, they're just increasing their emissions. What it does is not only economically, but from a national security standpoint, put America very much behind our adversaries. So, so that's the situation on that. The transportation agreement. All of us, whether you're the president, whether you're Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or Scott Perry, or probably any of you watching, agree that our infrastructure needs care, especially in Pennsylvania. Now, I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. We have an old state with a lot of old infrastructure, roads, bridges, broadband cable, especially in rural districts, water, sewer, gas, ports, airports, rail, all that stuff is in there. And it all needs attention, and we are behind other countries and developing nations. I think what this was is instead of talking about how we fix this stuff, we're talking about the Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and some of their leadership went to the president and said, well, we think this is important and we want to spend $2 trillion on it, not just $1 trillion or $1.5 trillion. It's so important we want to spend all that. And I think the president agreed with it. It is that important. The question is where do you come up with the money? And we've been trying to come up with the money, quite honestly, for 6 years to pay for these programs. What I'm concerned about is I'm concerned that this is just going to be another political statement where in a couple weeks, when it comes down to, well, how do we pay for it? And the president doesn't come up with any new ideas, and he's already offered them for 2 years, it's going to be, well, the president doesn't want to do infrastructure. This president wants to get to infrastructure and has offered his ideas. It's up to the legislature to offer our ideas and come to an agreement. And as a person who sat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee for 4 months. We're now into May, so we spent from the beginning of the year till now and haven't had one significant hearing on the transportation and infrastructure bill that needs to come out of the House this year. If these folks are really serious, and I say these folks, I'm talking about Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer in particular, if they're really serious, we all know we have the same goal. Let's figure out how we're going to pay for it, and that's where we need their involvement, not just more hyperbole about how the president, can't find a way to get to $2 trillion in additional spending. All right, a couple things. Holocaust Remembrance Week. There are people in this world that don't believe it happened and will literally say it didn't happen, that 6 million Jews weren't just exterminated by the Nazi regime. It's important to recognize these things because they did happen, and because we need to remember them for the sake of and honor of those who suffered them, but to make sure and ensure that they never happen again. And unfortunately, during this very same period of time, another synagogue was attacked, and we want to congratulate and hold up the Border Patrol agent that stepped into action, ran to the sound of the guns, and made sure that more people weren't hurt. And we just want to honor that individual as well and thank him for his bravery in this regard. So that's kind of what happened. Those are the big occurrences for the week. And as always, our offices are open. And again, it's Lupus Awareness Day, so it's time to advocate. If you know anybody that suffered this horrible affliction, we've got to find a way to make sure that we fix this as well and find a cure and find better treatment. So with that, hope you have a great week. God bless you.